Hello and welcome to our next edition of the Food Law series. And today Katrina and I are talking about alcohol labelling and specifically some of the discussion that's taking place in Europe on the transparency around alcohol labelling. And it's a really interesting issue, Katrina, because there's quite a marked difference between food and alcohol in terms of the amount of information the consumer receives on the label, because within the food information regulations, of course, alcoholic beverages over 1.2% volume have very limited amount of information that they're actually required to put on the label compared to a food or other drink product where actually there's quite an extensive list of mandatory requirements that must be included. So why is this suddenly, do you think, in the spotlight?
Well, I mean, part of it is actually that inherent contradiction, that there is something slightly wrong about the fact that if you say, I don't know, have a soft drink that you market and you have this long list of things that you have to put on the label, and suddenly you put a bit of alcohol in that, well, more than 1.2%, and suddenly you can take a load of stuff off. And there is a real feeling, particularly with the EU Commission, their report did actually say that there was no real justification for this inconsistency. So that in and of itself is an issue. But I also think that the current climate that we have around concerns about health and particularly obesity are a real driver here, because there's an understanding both at the EU level, but also, for example, DEFRA have come out and said that they're concerned consumers really don't understand the high sugar levels, the high carbohydrates levels, the calorie levels within alcoholic drinks, and that is a real gap in attempts to address what is, a very significant issue. So those together, I think, have been a real driver for the EU pushing to reconsider this issue and asking industry actually to reconsider this issue.
It's because it's interesting that even if as a manufacturer you are taking steps to try and say reduce the quantity of sugar in your product, or even not put any sugar in your product, of course you can't even make that claim on your label because under the health nutrition claims regulations you're not entitled to make a no sugar or reduced sugar claim. So it does seem quite tough in that sense if you are trying to do what would be perceived as the right thing.
In a way, it's even tougher for alcoholic drinks manufacturers, for food manufacturers generally, who are entitled to make those claims if they hit the 30%. I mean, that's a really tough thing to hit, but if you hit it, you can make the claim. Alcoholic drinks manufacturers, even if they hit it, they can't make the claim. So it is a sort of funny anomaly within the regime, I think, and there's a bit of scrutiny as to whether that's really producing the right effects.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so the Commission have responded by asking industry to look at some sort of self-regulating regime, and the industry have got together, and by that it's the industry in its broader sense, so it's beer, wine, spirits, manufacturers and other key stakeholders getting together and putting together this proposal where they can self-regulate how they label alcoholic beverages.
Yes.
Now, how do you think that proposal has been received?
I mean, there's been no formal response from the Commission, but technically we don't really know. However, we do know that the Commission we know that the Commission was very much looking for a solution whereby things like calories and such like were on label. And actually the proposal that has come back still maintains that a lot of this information will be off-label using QR codes or similar. So we rather suspect that that's not, that was probably not going to be well received, because I think that was a cornerstone of what they wanted to achieve. At the same time, we also know the Commission have looked at this legally and have highlighted that there are some concerns about whether actually some of these proposals comply with FIC, so Food Information for Consumers, and some of them potentially don't, which is problematic. And then I think there's also the issue of those sort of perennial issue really of those alcopops or RTDs that because they've gone with a category approach, so you've got a set of rules for beer, you've got a set of rules for spirits, you've got a set of rules for wine, not really quite clear where the alcopops and the RTDs fit in. And of course, these products are or tend to be quite high in sugar. They're of particular concern for all those health reasons. So it's possibly a little disappointing that it's not clear where they fit in.
So a number of potential criticisms that may come out against this self-regulatory proposal, although there are aspects of the industry, I mean the Brewers of Europe, for example, who have gone a step further and are voluntarily including more ingredient information on their labels. So they're taking the right steps. I mean, also we've seen some member states have adopted their own national laws, and I know Germany are looking at some more voluntary labelling, and Ireland, I think, are doing something in relation to advertising as well.
Yes, so Ireland have just passed some new legislation which hasn't come into effect yet, but it'll touch on labelling in terms of warnings, but also on the advertising of alcoholic drinks. So we potentially are going to end up with a situation where there's quite an inconsistent set of rules for alcoholic labelling across Europe. Because as you say, you've got countries like Germany who've already got things, you've got Ireland bringing things in, so that could cause its own issues for the drinks industry.
So really, I mean, we're just waiting now to see how the Commission are going to respond, and I think that will determine the course of events and how industry is going to have to adapt its labelling. But I think it's probably fair to say that change is coming.
I think it is. I think there's a watching brief on this one.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katrina. Thank you.